if anything, you would be looking at it and you'd be saying Fenton has more natural talent and better, more skillful than Aidan O'Shea, and you'd be looking at it and saying he's playing on a better team. And O'Shea is this warrior who inspires his teammates and, you know, really brings the fight to a lot of these teams and continues to do it, and he's just such a robust and enjoyable player. For me, I'd have great admiration for him, and I don't understand why people will be knocking him, to be honest. I don't know why he's a target for it.
I don't get it.
Mickey Hart here, you're listening to the GAA Hour Football Show.
The GAA Hour with Colm Parkinson is brought to you by Paddy Power, home of the Money Back Special.
I'm not finished yet, it took me a long time to get here.
So we're down to 4 lads, and we couldn't have picked better semi-finals. Let's be honest about it. Dublin and Mayo, huge grudge match in the last decade, and then Tyrone Kerry, who also are a huge grudge match from the previous decade, more or less, but no love lost between either teams, no love lost between either sets of supporters, and we've that to look forward to on Thursday. So we can't talk any more about the semi-finals now. The big story of the weekend, obviously, is Mayo beat Donegal at home, and it's not a surprise really, because most of us predicted Mayo to win that one. They were outstanding on the night. We'll get into that in part 2. That's the one we're going to concentrate on. But it was just a brilliant occasion. I got there at 3 o'clock in the day into Castlebar, and I had to drive a mile out of the town just to get parking. And I forced my way into a parking spot there. At that stage, I could have had to keep going further. There was a line of cars. There was music in there for the first 3 hours. The stand was absolutely wedged. And in fairness, lots of Donegal fans in the stand as well. There was a real carnival atmosphere around it. A packed McHale Park. And in fairness, the Mayo team responded. I called them dead men walking at one point during the year. I thought they were. I think it was after the Armagh match. But they're definitely not dead men walking now. They're alive and kicking.
Yeah, look, what an occasion. I think when the Super 8 was introduced, this was the kind of the perfect solution that we were hoping to see games like this in provincial venues where a team was at home, a massive atmosphere in a provincial town, and the game sometimes games can follow the atmosphere. And it was one of them, bit of rain always helps as well. Tricky conditions, turnover of possession an awful lot. Just makes it so exciting.
Yeah.
We can pass comment on the quality at certain times, but if you park all of that and just enjoy it as a spectacle and as a piece of sporting drama and entertainment, you'd go a long way to find much better.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. You could kind of say Donegal were completely shafted by this draw in that they got the easiest game, no disrespect to Meath, but everyone's beaten Meath and beaten them, covered the handicap against them, even though Meath, of course, have done all right for half of the game or whatever. They got that game first at home. They would have beaten Meath in Navan, they would have beaten them in Croke Park. And then after performing well in the first 2 games, they end up with Mayo away. And it's the only game they've lost all year. Mayo have lost twice. Something a little bit unfair about that. I wouldn't have as much sympathy for Donegal in that they had the home venue last year in Ballyshannon against Tyrone and couldn't seal that deal either. So I don't know whether to have too much sympathy for them, but you would say that it was a very, very tough ask on Donegal to have to go away to McHale Park to get into an All-Ireland quarter-final.
It really was, yeah.
Semi-final.
Undefeated, and they won the Ulster Championship. Everything was going great for them. Everything was going bad for Mayo, and then suddenly Mayo had a home quarter-final knockout match, and coincided with Mayo just sort of really getting back to levels that we know they can intensity-wise. So unlucky for Donegal in that point of view as well. I think they would have beaten them any other week.
Yeah, well, I think if you look at the format of the championship, I mean, Mayo have lost 2 games, Donegal have only lost 1, and there's one team advancing to a semi-final. I mean, you can look at that and say it's just a bit unfortunate for Donegal. I mean, look, we don't want to get into a championship structures waffle about it, but it's unfortunate for Donegal that they lost it. The game they lost was at the wrong time of the season.
Yeah, and I suppose
that can happen.
It's the look of the draw in anything, and they did draw the weaker team at home, and that was just the look of the draw went against them this year. It's unfortunate.
And look, ultimately, if you do need a little bit of luck when you're if you're down with players injured and stuff like that. Like Mayo have had a lot of injuries. You could put that down to bad luck. Donegal, Jason McGee having to go out. Different injuries at different times have affected both teams.
Yeah.
But both teams had an opportunity to grasp the game the other night and win it, and Mayo fell over the line ahead of Donegal.
A couple of points from the game. The penalty decision, I thought Goff got that right. I think when Goff is refereeing your game, you can't pull a jersey. It's the one thing he's allergic to. He's pulling you for holding hands. Now Murphy had his arm across Keegan. I'm not sure that's a foul. That's kind of shielding the ball, but Keegan pulled his jersey. I think there's no question it was a penalty, and it was a pretty brave call from Goff.
Yeah, well, look, that's his style of refereeing. Like he lets a huge amount of physicality go, but on the technical fouls, he's very sharp on them. So like, there could be a massive physical exchange with a loose ball on the ground, and he tends to let that go. But as soon as there are, strong arms across on the tackle, he can let it go. But as soon as there's a pull of the jersey, that's just what he blows for. And like, that's applying the rule.
And
can't complain with
and
that.
The players would have been well warned of, know what Goff is like, lads.
Yeah.
I don't want to see any of that from you. He'll blow you from 50 yards away, So Keegan...
Well, like in that particular incident, like when the ball is in the air, Keegan has his back to the ball. So what's he at like?
Yeah.
So he has his back to the ball. He only turns at the last second to face the ball, at which point he has a massive chunk of Michael Murphy's jersey. Murphy is trying to hold him off as he's watching the ball coming in. Keegan is only eyes for him. So, I mean, to me, he's not trying to play the ball. Keegan is not trying to play the ball. He's playing the man. And at the last second, he kind of makes a swipe for the ball. So it's a foul. Like I can't understand how anyone would really be complaining about it.
I think James Horne questions nearly every decision. He's gone mad on the sideline. The camera keeps panning to him, but I was watching him. He gives the linesman a lot of abuse, which I don't think there's any real call for either. It was interesting that Murphy put the penalty to the right, because remember we talked here about the clutch penalties always go bottom left, and Aidan O'Shea walked in and whispered to Henley. So I was watching this closely, and he clearly told Henley, because Henley guessed bottom right. But I suppose that's true, it's the clutch penalty, but only if you hadn't done it the very game before. So Murphy double bluffed him and went the other side, knowing that he did that against Kerry and that Henley's going to think he goes that way. So this is all a game of cat and mouse between the goalie and Murphy. Brilliant stuff from Murphy.
Yeah, sure. The mind games in these scenarios are hilarious, because it's sort of like a double bluff. The keeper could be thinking, he always goes to this side on the clutch penalty. He's not going to go it this time because he knows I know where he's going to go.
Yeah.
He knows I know.
It's just a complete farce. So look at it. I mean, it's a guessing game at the end of the day. Like, if Henley had guessed the right direction, he would have saved it. It wasn't a great penalty.
No.
In terms of it being like really well struck or right in the corner. It just so happens sometimes you score a bad penalty.
Yeah, no, well, if he goes the wrong way, it's always a good penalty, right?
If it hits the net, it's a good penalty.
That's the way it is. What about Hugh McFadden's hit on O'Shea coming out? Like, I mean, it was stupidity from McFadden, and I've watched McFadden in this game. He does nothing the whole game other than pushing lads and pushing them in the chest and hitting lads, and I don't know what he's playing at, but I don't think there was much dirty in it. It was inconclusive on the replays whether he went in with an elbow or was it just a shoulder charge into the chest, which is a yellow, which he got for it.
Yeah, like I didn't see an elbow anyway, but I just thought it was a bit, he blindsided him. Like,
it's totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
Really,
unnecessary, completely unnecessary.
O'Shea was sort of having it with Murphy, and they were, they both knew what they were both at. They were having a little bit of bargy, and then suddenly, bang, just out of picture, out of his eye line, just he's absolutely flattened by this big ham of a man. Like, you know.
But he goes around into all this kind of old nonsense, and he'd be better off concentrating on blocking the likes of James Carr when he's kicking a telegraph point off his left bloody foot.
To be honest, sometimes you just think when you're watching a game like that, as a neutral, and you're going, God, like if I was reffing the game, I just tell him, it'd be like a challenge match. You just go over to the manager and say, here, will you take this Egypt off so I don't have to send him off? Because he's wrecking me head with this rubbish. Like, I want to referee a game, like, not this crap. Lads, this big macho man act, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's such nonsense.
It is nonsense. So Higgins, I'm on the call that Higgins was a fair black. It's fair enough that McBrearty grabbed his hand, but Higgins had already put the hand over his shoulder and was in the act of pulling him down anyways. So, that was poor stuff by Keith Higgins.
To me, it's the most obvious black card I've ever seen in my life. It's the exact reason the black card was brought in. McBrearty wins the ball. He's heading for goal. If you look at the replay, Higgins with his left hand has McBrearty's jersey gripped behind his back. Then he has his right arm around his neck.
Over his neck,
and he actually is on his back with his legs wrapped around him. and people are saying this is a borderline call for black card. I mean, what's the natural reaction when someone grabs you around the neck? Is probably you have the ball under your left arm. What are you supposed to do with your right hand? You can't get him off yet. You're going to grab his hand. It's just a natural reaction. And he's on my back, referee. Yeah. What do you want me to do? Try and
I agree.
Unbelievable.
That wasn't an example of where you're pulling him down with you. It wasn't. It just wasn't.
And this idea that the players are going down easy. Like, we know that that's sort of happening in some cases, but your momentum is going forward, and when someone's pulling you back and you're trying to get forward away from them, you can fall forward and your momentum takes you forward, especially when Higgins is going down with you.
He's on your back, yeah.
But like, this is a situation, I would have complete sympathy for Higgins if he went in with an arm around him to try and foul him, okay? But his left hand was held out in the air and he actually had his 2 feet on the ground. He had his 2 feet in the air, legs wrapped around McBrearty, right to the ground. He had a grip of the jersey with his left hand behind his back, if you watch the replay. I mean, the commentary on it, that it was a borderline call. I mean, I don't.
No. Yeah, Dick Clerkin said it was 50-50.
Oh, Jesus.
What was it? What a 50-50 between free in or free out? Like, what?
You've made the first mistake by listening to Dick Clerkin. There was 2 black cards in the Kerry-Meath game and they were borderline. I thought White got a harsh deal and the Meath player got a harsh. Like, they're the 50-50s.
These are the ones where, and I saw the 2 of them, where a guy goes to make a run, he's checked off the ball and he goes to ground when he's hit. The hit isn't enough to take him to the ground, but it's the thing of flamboyantly showing the referee or the linesman that I've been checked off the ball. The reality is, it is a black card to check the man off the ball. Just because he has to go to ground to get the decision doesn't, like, we don't like to see that. But I mean, if you check a man, you run the risk. So it's clever play from the guy who's making the run. Sometimes these guys are making a run. They know they're not really going to get the ball, but they're making a support run. If you check them in a lazy way instead of running with them, you can't really complain about having a black. I know they are soft, and we can argue that it's harsh for a guy to go off the field for such an infringement, but that is the rule. So people need to stop whinging about these rules and saying it's unfair. The rule is there. Stop being lazy. Either run with the man or let him go past you.
Yeah, stop checking it. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Did you notice, you wouldn't have noticed this on the television, but Jason McGee injured himself in the very first ball he went for. He spent nearly, I'd say, 6, 7, 8 minutes trying to gesture to the sideline to come off. Yeah. Now, Declan Bonner was interviewed afterwards and he said it was a dead leg. It couldn't have been a dead leg. It was his hamstring. And it looked very obvious to me. It was his hamstring. He couldn't run. And he was signalling to the bench. Now, this is a fella who was an injured out before the game. You'd imagine the physio is locked on him for the first while. He continued on in that game, not being able to run. It was completely out of the kind of professional standards. You wouldn't see it in a club game. Anyways, and Jason McGee was very inexperienced. Now immediately should have just sat on the ground and then the game will have to be stopped. So he was a bit stupid trying to play through, Bonner says it's a dead leg, lads. If it's a dead leg, you don't go off in a championship game with a dead leg. You just don't, unless it's one that you literally can't walk on. But he was jogging around freely. It was like the hamstring went, but not too badly. So it was just strange.
Well, to me it's very bizarre because it's on the back of Paddy McBrearty in the Kerry match with about, I'd say, maybe 5-10 minutes to go, and I saw him going over to the sideline and telling the sideline his hamstring was gone to take him off, and they left him on for the rest of the game. So I'm kind of, after seeing that, I'm kind of thinking, well, what the hell is going on with this Donegal management team? If players are telling them that they're physically injured and they can't continue, why are they leaving them on the field? Now, sometimes you can have guys who are a little bit soft on themselves, and we see it, there's always the guys in every club team or whatever that no matter whatever happens, they're going to lie down on the ground, and by the time the physio gets to them, they're up and they run off again. But I mean, this is senior inter-county championship football. If Jason McGee is saying he's injured, I mean, that's not a weakness mentally that he's afraid of the battle.
But now, if it's a dead leg, I would say it is mentally weak because he's jogging around on this dead leg. But why did Bonner say it's a dead leg?
He wouldn't have been looking to come off if it was a dead leg.
No. But why did Bonner say it was a dead leg?
Jason McGee walked off the pitch before they'd made a substitution and then I think had to come back on to be taken off. Like, I mean, I just think on the back of the Paddy McBrearty thing, I just find the whole thing a little bit unusual as to why, if a player is saying he's injured, he isn't immediately taken off. Like a muscle, you can't run off a muscle injury.
No.
If it is a dead leg, I can understand the management maybe trying to get him to play on, but that doesn't happen. A player doesn't go off with a dead leg if they can continue on. They give it a go. They try and run the thing off.
Yeah, it looked to me that was his hamstring. It really looked like it was his hamstring, and that's why I was very surprised to see those comments from Bonner. But we might find out a little bit more about that. We're going to cover that in part 2. Anyways, because the game yesterday in Oma was a complete waste of time. Both managers talked it up. Jim Gavin says, I thought the atmosphere was excellent today. The stand behind me was certainly full, as it was your side, I presume. I thought both teams went really hard at it. A great game of football. Great entertainment for the supporters who travelled up from Dublin and locally from Tyrone. Mickey Hart, the same thing. Did people not come along here in their droves and enjoy that, or were they bored out of their heads watching that game? It was interesting for the people who were there. The players didn't show any sign of, I wish we weren't here, or this is no big significant game. They gave it all they had, and it's a lovely summer day in Omagh to see 15,000 people here. I enjoyed that game today, even if I didn't enjoy the outcome. They must be the only two really that enjoyed that, because it was just boring stuff. I was considering flicking to the penalties in the Charity Shield. It was gone that boring.
Look, it was a challenge match. That's why. I mean,
the reality was it was a challenge game.
Yeah. It was. Look, both teams. No criticism of either of them. The players on the field were giving it a good effort. Absolutely nothing to do with that. But in terms of the overall competition, both teams already qualified. It was like the last group game in the Champions League match with both teams already qualified. Nobody cares.
No, second string teams.
And people still go to watch these games because they like to watch a bit of sport. But I mean, to be talking the game up as anything other than what it was, which was a glorified challenge match.
Well, I think both managers obviously are talking it up because they didn't want to disrespect the competition by picking second string teams. So I can see their motivation for saying, that was a great game. It wasn't a great game. It was boring. Now, I found myself very bored watching it. The result was inevitable. Dublin pushed the 3-4 points ahead. It was all over. Tyrone's second string, not as good as Dublin's second string. That's pretty much all you can say about it. Because I suppose the big talking point was that Diarmuid Connolly played. I was very surprised at this. I didn't think he'd see any game time. He's only back in not very long at all. I didn't think it was Jim Gavin's style to start pushing fellas forward ahead of the likes of Bernard Brogan, who was on the bench, who's worked like a dog for the last year to get back in. So I just thought it was bizarre that he played. In fairness, it was a smart move playing in midfield when he did play, because he just strolled around. He got in no trouble. He stayed on the outside of the Tyrone screen. He was like just an option to throw it back out. He sprayed a few nice passes around. I thought he played very well, considering he's done feck all in the last year and a half. But I actually think I could have played well in that role yesterday, because he got into no kind of tackling situations. He was always on the outside of trouble, and that's why they played him midfield. It was the ultimate let's ease him back into it. Now, whether that is any preparation for what he'd get against Mayo, where you're constantly tracking runs, where you're being surrounded by people, where the intensity is in your face, it's zero prep. Now, I still think he'll see zero game time against Mayo unless they're 3 points down with 3 or 4 minutes to go and it's the last throw of the dice.
Yeah, look, it's very hard to know. Look, if you're just to analyse his performance, look, it was what you call almost the perfect reintroduction to inter-county football for him.
He a bit of a freak, isn't he? He didn't look out of place there after that long.
Athletically, he's supreme. I mean, a couple of his bursts of acceleration, things like that.
Yeah.
And he's all class off left and right. We know all of this. There's nothing unusual about Connolly there. He's an impressive athlete.
Sorry, just to cut you off, but Connolly at full flow could have scored 7 points yesterday if he really wanted to.
Oh yeah, to me, he still looked like there was definitely an obvious lack of sharpness from him 2 or 3 years ago or 4 years ago, whenever we would have considered him to be at his peak in terms of ball into the keeper's hands. He was dispossessed at least once, but I mean, you're going to expect that. I mean, the level, the pace of club level football is different. And look, Connolly, I would expect he would be able to adapt, and he strolled through the game yesterday. I mean, he actually looked more of these in the game than almost a lot of the Dublin forwards. But then again,
the role he was given,
he wasn't playing as a forward, so it's easy to look like you're cruising through the game when you just kind of stand around the middle and you have nobody tackling you for most of the game.
That's it,
and you have 2 or 3 options available of unmarked men all the time. So let's be fair about it. It's absolutely zero preparation for, as you say, going into the cauldron of playing against Mayo. But nonetheless, it was nice to see him back. He's a stylish player. I mean, even in a boring game, all the highlights are probably him kicking a 30-metre pass off the outside of his boot to an unmarked man. But look, nonetheless, it looks good.
Having said that, no one else on the field was doing that.
Oh,
like,
they're not able
could.
to.
They're not.
It
seems to be not able to. That what Connolly was doing there was basic for him. He's just looking for an inside pass, and he's given a nice one off the. And there's no one else on the field doing that with that regularity. Exactly, it's just bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, and the players always seem to use him as a crutch. I know he was free out in that position, but they always throw it back to him. He does have this higher esteem within the panel, obviously. But I know both sets of players were giving it their all in that. But intent-wise, there was no need to try and break a tackle. I think Paddy Small broke a tackle early on, and I don't remember that happening again.
Yeah.
It was always like eventually somebody got free and they could have a shot, or they could play a pass inside.
Yeah,
but you
there was
never
no
had to take
major.
anybody on.
No, I completely agree. Wasn't it bizarre to see Connolly, like he got a deserved black, no big deal with that, the game was nearly over, but it was laughing with Jim Gavin about it. Like Jim Gavin I think he's a blind spot with this. I've never in my life, Jim Gavin is poker faced from start of a game to the end of a game. If a player walks off, he doesn't even crack a smile. He puts his hand out, shakes their hand and ignores them as they walk past. Other than that, he laughed about this black card. I just think Jim Gavin is just acting a little bit weird about all this, is he?
Well, I don't know. Look, to treat...
Very unlike Jim Gavin to be
but
laughing, number one.
I know.
And then laughing at a black card decision. I thought that didn't show the game much respect.
Yeah, look, fair enough. But I think in reality, in order to treat people equally, you can't treat everybody the same. And maybe it's taken a long time to get to that point with Connolly where he has to kind of treat him a little bit differently. He's almost treating him like the prodigal son here,
Yeah.
Come back, Dermot. I thought the line of that Dermot loves Dublin GAA, like it's just...
And Dublin loves him.
Dublin loves him. Well, the fans love him, and rightly so, but it's just such a classic. I mean, it's... look, I don't know whether it's... he's just enjoying the crack and seeing Jim Gavin himself is having a good laugh at all the stuff in the media about Connolly and all that, and maybe together they're having a bit of a laugh about the whole thing. There's no doubt that if Connolly's back in there, look, the circumstances of him coming back into the fold, park that for 1 minute. The fact that he's in there, he's clearly a very intelligent footballer. You can see that by the way he conducts himself on the field. Does a guy of his experience and ability have something to offer a group like that? Absolutely he does, and he's clearly a far more talented and better player than a lot of the forwards they have in there. That's beyond debate.
Yeah.
But it's just the timing of it all is where the question marks kind of have been I suppose have been brought up by the likes of ourselves.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So now the answer is there now. He's got his game time. That's over and done with. The analysis that this has been done to distract from the 5 in a row, that's all nonsense because that's over now. Now it's the 5 in a row versus Mayo. It's not about Connolly anymore. He got his game. He definitely offers. It's actually, I don't know whether he's going to offer anything against Mayo because that game just didn't tell us whether he is or not. It's a weird one, but we'll talk about that on Thursday.
If you were to judge it based on the performances, based on their appearances as substitutes and everything else, Dermot Connolly is the first forward coming on for Dublin. He has to. The rest of them have done nothing to show that they've come on in games for Dublin or Hammer teams and they've made no impact. Like Costello's going to be a sub because Dean Rock will start ahead of him. Really, you're talking about Costello and Connolly are the first 2 subs coming into the forwards in my mind.
Right. Jeez,
like,
I don't know. But
you're not going to play O'Gara. O'Gara offered nothing.
No.
Kevin McMenamin is there, but he doesn't have the same punch that he used to have. Bernard Brogan has fantastic movement and things like that, but he was a sub yesterday, which means he's way down the pecking order.
That's true.
Paddy Small has gotten loads of opportunities and he can't be trusted because he'd probably get the ball and kick it wide.
You're coming on right against Mayo, and instead of being in the pocket and getting hand passes back to you, you're spraying around, you're looking good, doing all the stuff that you're brilliant at. Now you're chasing after Paddy Durkin and you're gasping for air because you haven't played.
But he's only going to have to play for 15, 20 minutes.
It'll take you 10 minutes to get over your wind when you're chasing, lads. Like, I mean,
no, but I'm making the point that when you compare him, it's not about whether he's able to do that or not. The point is he's better than all the rest of them.
Oh yeah, well that's sure he's better than anyone on the starting team, if we're being honest. Like, I mean, if you're to go that far,
I don't think you can say that at the minute. But if
a better footballer.
He's naturally a better and more talented player. But those 6 players are probably they're embedded now in the team. There's no debate. But I'm talking about the guys that are coming in off the bench. The impact that Dublin were getting off their bench in other years was what was getting them over the line. Their bench is not improving the team anymore.
No, I agree.
The bench is weakening the team. Connolly, if he comes on, won't weaken the team. I'm not saying that at this point I don't know whether he would strengthen the team or not because he's just been out of it for so long, and I totally accept it's different to swanning around in a challenge match than playing in the hyper competitiveness of an All-Ireland semi-final. But he's not going to significantly weaken the team. And at the minute, from the form and from the performances I've seen from a lot of the other players, with the exception of maybe Sean Bugler, the rest of the players are making the team worse than the guys they're coming on for.
Yeah, okay, I'll accept that point. You mentioned it, Jim Gavin. Diarmid loves Dublin. Myself and the fellow players love him because he's so committed to the cause. Now that was the bit I thought was unbelievable. He's so committed to the cause. He literally tried to go to Boston 3 weeks ago. Like, it's Jim Gavin. And I'd love to, I just read these quotes, they're on RT website. I'd love to have just seen him saying it, because I'd say it was just this
audio,
smirk
listen
on
to
the
it.
side.
I'd love the video.
Okay, we'll move on from that. We might mention something on that on Thursday's show. Have to give Meath a mention here. Cian, you were at this one. Groundhog game, I'd say, for Meath. Competitive. Like, can every game follow the same kind of, routine? What's the hell's going on here?
Yeah, well, look, Meath they've achieved exactly what you would expect this season. Really, like, they've done well. They've hit all their markers, and it's a fair reflection of where they are currently as a group. In my view, they're that probably. They mightn't quite be the 9 or 8 or 9 points, but I suppose that's the evidence of the results. So maybe they are, but they're probably anywhere from 4 to 10 points worse than the kind of the teams around them in Division 1. And obviously then I would see Dublin as being, probably 8 or 10 points ahead of that group again, and that's the 16 points they beat Meath by. And Meath are probably 4 or 5 or 6 points better than the next group of teams below them. Yeah. So they're very competitive. They've in terms of their work rate, how they're set up, they're a difficult team probably to play against and get scores against. They defend very well. They have huge work rate throughout the team. And really where they're found lacking is they just can't keep the scoreboard ticking over for long enough. So when the energy leaves the legs in the second half, they can't, I suppose, make the same ground or punch the same holes in the opposition, which limits their scoring power. And in terms of players coming in off the bench, the team is kind of weakened with players. More often than not, the team is getting weaker as substitutions are made.
They need some more players.
Particularly up front. So, look, that may come from the improvement in some of the younger players that, with the experience of this year, maybe they'll kick on and be better next year, or maybe they just need to find a few more players. It's very hard to know. Like, players will naturally, some players will improve and get to the level. And, look, it's been very positive for them. I'm sure they'll go into next season really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
That's all you can really say about it at the minute. Like, very positive and disappointing maybe with the way
Shane Walsh got 3 from play yesterday. That was a good
really
return
good
from him. I think he's better than Connolly. He's more tougher. He's a bigger fella. I think Connolly's always going to suffer from his size.
He just has that physical presence that Conlon doesn't have. Conlon's movement is superb, but Meath would need to have far more territory in the game and be playing in those lovely little passes from kind of the 45 or within, to like that they were able to against Laois, for example, where Conlon was able to make hay, because his just movement is so good and he's sharp off the mark. But when the ball is coming from the half back line,
I don't think the modern game a fella that size can make it. I've seen it with Donny Brennan and Laois myself. It's just incredibly difficult. I just don't see how it's possible. The space is at a premium and too many players can get hands on you. So so there's no real way of avoiding all this contact as much anymore. So I can't see how he will. The children on the hill were fantastic. I know they invaded the field at half time. We've seen that 101 times, but it's very old school to see a ball go over the bar and have 30 children killing each other to get their hands on this ball. It brought me back years ago in a moor park. We'd do it with slitters in hurling games. The ball would go over and it'd go over the net. And Jesus, you could really get a few thumps if you're down close enough to get this ball. There's a mad scramble to get it. But it was just brilliant to see it. I don't know, just bring us back to the grassy banks and stuff like that. I love it. They put terraces on the grass bank on the town end, did they? No, well, I think that what they have done is they have a bit of fencing up to keep people off the bank. But I don't know, these kids are able to find their way in. And in fairness, it can't be. There's not enough stewards there to look after it. But look, it's good. It provides a bit of colour to the whole thing. I mean, it definitely does.
The best games I was at in Navan were always where there was a big gang up on the bank behind the goals, and it just creates that cauldron of having people all the way around the ground like a nice bowl, and it's actually a good viewing point. It's high enough up, so it's good to see it, and a bit of crack as well. Yeah,
definitely was. Peter Cian was complaining about the wind, so he says we're reasonably happy at half time because we had played against a strong wind. We didn't think the wind was going to die like it did in the second half, but we're reasonably happy. We always expected a battle, and we've just got to survive the battle. The win just completely went, did it? This is
apparently so.
And Clifford had a back spasm, but he's going to be okay for next week. So that's kind of the talking points out of that one.
Yeah, well, look, it'd be great for Kerry to get Clifford back, and as things turned out, if his back is all right, he's had a nice little 2-week rest, which when they get through is definitely of benefit, because it's the week turnaround from an intense game can be quite difficult.
Yeah, definitely they're going to need him. So Roscommon finished the season on a high, and it turns out to be a very good year for them. Let's be honest, they've beaten both Mayo, Roscommon and Cork in the championship, so that's fine. The Blot, and they performed all right against Tyrone at home. The Blot is the hammering against Dublin, but a lot of teams come in for that kind of treatment. Cunningham said, we targeted a win this weekend. We really wanted this year's campaign to finish with a first Super 8s win for Roscommon. That looked like it was definitely more intensity in that game, and there was a bit of hitting in it. There was 6, I hadn't seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yellow cards flashed in a row after a little melee. There was a lot of hard man stuff, holding jerseys and stuff like that, but the referee just did a 6. Have you ever seen him doing that before?
Well, like, fair play to them, because it would have been the easiest thing in the world just for players to pick up an injury, you know, in the week leading up to it. Couldn't be bothered of a trip to Cork, you know, just take me out for the season now. Like, so the fact that they went down, and obviously they did have that targeted, like, let's get a win in the Super 8s. We did much better against Tyrone. Now we've got this target to complete.
Yeah, both teams wanted it. Both teams wanted to win it. There's no doubt about that. But there was some very dodgy defending from Cork. Like, I mean, Mark Collins for Stack's first goal was just awful defending. He's on goal side of him and just gets completely wrong-footed, and it's an easy goal. And then Killoran's goal at the end, Sean White just ignored the 1-2. So he's marking Killoran. He just throws it into Stack. And then White just says, well, that's it. Phew, he's gotten rid of it. Killoran just goes and takes and White had just given up. Had stopped, so there was still that kind of, you know, maybe, I don't know, you would have tracked that in a really championship game.
Yeah, maybe a lack of bite when there's nothing really at stake. But they're the sorts of things that a manager would be looking at and probably obviously be pointing out to next season or whatever, and just saying, like, these are the weaknesses mentally that we have that we need to sort out to be that ruthless team that kicks on a level. But for Roscommon, it's been a fantastic season for them, and on the back of the hammering they got off Dublin, like that would have hurt their pride as well, because of, you know, the fact that they've beaten Mayo and beaten Galway this season. They would have been seeing themselves as a team that could really compete in the Super 8s. And look, if Mayo are in the All-Ireland semi-final, I mean, Roscommon would be looking at that saying, we've to measure these lads, sure, we're as good as them, why couldn't it be us?
See, styles make fights.
True.
And
so
provincial championship makes fights.
Yeah. So
local rivalry makes fights.
Absolutely, yeah. You know? But that's from their perspective, that's what they'd be looking at. So the win for them was probably more important. That Cork might have wanted the win, but I think Roscommon, for their own esteem, and they needed the win, really.
Yeah.
Even though it was a nothing game from everyone else, for Roscommon I think it was an important game.
Enda Smith, what a beautiful finish that was, lads, because when you take the ball at that pace, the easy thing to do is just to lace that off the inside routes, and he just, like, it takes a lot of skill to place that with that amount of power. We said that on the show loads of times. As Tomas Clancy tried to ankle tap him like Peter Stringer as he was going through, he would have been getting a black card if he got that. That was a brilliant goal. So it was a really good win for Roscommon, and like I said, they'll be absolutely delighted with their season, and they had a really good chance of staying up in Division 1-2, which they hadn't done under previous management, because they beat Monaghan and they drew with Tyrone in Division 1. So, like, I mean, they had a really good season. There's no point in saying anything else.
Yeah, Tomas Clancy, somebody who's really stood out for me in the Super 8s, just now that you mention him. Just there's a nice bit of dog in him. Like, I really like the cut of his jib.
Oh yeah, any ankle tapper you like. Yeah. Anyways, that's the Ulster coming out new. But Cork, just a quick mention on Cork. So obviously they lost the 3 Super 8 games, but in general it's a positive year. The under-20s had a brilliant win. I saw just 1 or 2 small highlights out of this, but, like, I mean, to come from 1-6 to no score down, their manager Keith Ricken said the big thing was that they were trying to solve their own problems. I really like that. He's not taking credit for the team turning around this 1-6 to no score. Big thing is that they're trying to solve their own problems. It's a thing we all do. What else were we going to do? Crawl into a corner? There was no corner here. There was going to be another 45-50 minutes to play, and we're not looking good. It was either man up and die, and bloody man up they did. Definitely did. There's no doubt. To come back and win it the way they did against Dublin, incredible stuff, and great scenes then as well. And, you know, you add that, I think they're in the minor semi-final too. So now all of a sudden Cork, I was reading the comments, someone says Cork football doesn't ever go away, we just take a few years off every now and then. But listen, I would be fantastic to see Cork back in the top level. We need those top level teams.
Did you see Cathal O'Mahony's interview afterwards after the under-20 game?
No.
Jeez, it was powerful stuff, inspirational, like,
Really?
almost shouting down the camera, and he was like, we're dogs, and we're dogs that fight in a pack, so we just kept our pack going and we kept our county going.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Hair raising stuff.
Getting goosebumps here now just hearing that. So yeah, that's brilliant. Like, I mean, the Archer goal was comical, lads, wasn't it? Because, like, I mean, not only was it a bad kick out, how did he let it in? It was only a little dribbler. It wasn't even a hard shot. It was just, I'd say Archer just swung his leg at it and went, here, look, he might not be back in goals. And he had made it. Maybe he just made it ahead of the ball and ran over it.
Archer's such a goal scorer, you just think he had this all calculated in his head.
Him.
He says, no, this is too easy. I'll try and nutmeg your man on the line.
If I calculate his steps running back and hit it at this power, I will nutmeg him.
And I remember there's a little divot just before the line.
This Archer is unbelievable. So that's it. So congratulations to Cork on the under-20. Last bit of news from the weekend before we get into Mayo Donegal talk is Paul Galvin is gone to Wexford. This was a bit very left field, I suppose. Himself and Davy fighting over dual players would be worth the entrance fee to the meeting alone. He said it was an interesting comment he made. While I don't see myself as a GAA manager in the conventional sense, this was in the Sunday Times that he writes in, while I don't see myself as a GAA manager in the conventional sense, taking on the Wexford senior job is something I'm comfortable with because of the calibre of people I've experienced at board level. I'm not sure what he means about not being a conventional manager. I will listen. We'll see when he takes over what he didn't expand on that, but that would be the first question I'd be asking him. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So listen, that's the last bit of news. Lads have no comment on that. There's no point in speculating on it.
He's so intriguing, Paul Galvin.
Right, okay, we'll be back in part 2 and we'll do some analysis on Mayo Donegal. So that's it, Mads. Mayo 114, Donegal 110. So Mayo were by far the better team. It's actually a funny one in that Donegal didn't perform at all and were well in the game, which is... It's funny that we talk Mayo up for a brilliant performance. Donegal were very, very poor, and yet there was nothing really in it. It's hard to understand that.
Yeah, look, it was a game where there was so many kind of skill errors from both teams. The finishing from both teams was desperately bad. Attacking play from Donegal in the first half was just dire at times.
They were living off scraps now.
Yeah,
Mayo dominated them.
They were, but at the same time, there's a reason for that. It's because of their use of possession. They were taking the ball into contact, getting turned over. Their movement obviously wasn't good enough. Support play wasn't good enough. So they were the architects of their own downfall. Now, Mayo, don't get me wrong, Mayo brought a level of intensity to it in the first half that Donegal didn't match. And then Donegal in the second half took over for large periods, and I think they might have missed 6 shots in a row at a time where there was only maybe 2 points in it.
Murphy got it back to 1 with that inspirational point, and then they went on a roll of missing. Murphy missed 2. Murphy missed 2 easy ones. Langan missed 2 from a similar side. McClune missed an easy one. Now maybe there was I think they'd been pushed out to 3 or 4 at that stage. But Donegal definitely weren't at the rate. They weren't at the races. They just weren't at the races. Outside of 1 or 2, Darrow Boyle, Michael Murphy, for a while, even though Murphy was uncharacteristically sloppy in that second half with a free and the one from play when they really needed it. But yeah, they just didn't show up. I suppose let's start with Mayo and how they're able to bring that level of intensity, and other teams can't do that. And my opinion is that game was played on Mayo terms. That was a similar game to Mayo Dublin, for example. It was pairing up pretty much all over the field. Donegal were dropping McFadden back as a sweeper, which I think is a huge mistake, the same as Colm Kavanagh in Tyrone. When you're playing a man-on-man game, it's the same analysis with Tyrone. You can't lose that big man from out around there. So you're losing him by going in as a sweeper. So now you're down a big man. You're down Jason McGee. Michael Murphy played in the full forward line for the whole of the second half. Look who you're missing. Mayo dominating them out around the middle of the field because you've got men versus boys. But it's men versus boys because you're pulling McFadden, who's a big lump, who could physically put it up to O'Shea. And he's running off O'Shea. He was marking O'Shea. He's going off O'Shea.
Giving him too much freedom.
Yeah, too much freedom. Aidan O'Shea then can dictate the pace of the game. He pretty much has a free role.
Yeah, well... the wind is always a factor in these games in Castlebar. It's almost like a league match with the weather conditions. I thought Mayo handled it well in the first half, in that Colm Boyle dropped off as a sweeper. He was able to sweep because Donegal had McFadden dropping deep, which meant Mayo were all able to just drop a line. They conceded the kickouts, almost all the kickouts to Donegal, let Donegal work their way up the field, brought them down a blind alley. A Donegal man had step inside with weather conditions, a decent hit, and the ball was spilled, and then Mayo broke at pace and squandered a lot of opportunities, but got some to get them into the lead. And look, let's be honest, Mayo got a complete fluke of a goal as well. Like, without that fluke of a goal, it's a different contest as well near the end of the game. So I think while like Mayo did bring a level of intensity, there was damn all in the game, and Mayo's wastefulness again almost cost him. Like, Darren Cohen missed a gilt-edged chance, Andy Moore missed one in the second half after a great bit of work. But like, there's, on the base of that performance, I mean, they won't keep it kicked out to Dublin in my view, because they're just going to miss. Like, even if they get forward, sure, they're not able to put the ball over the bar.
Cohen was kind of half asleep. Paddy McGrath must have won 3 or 4 kickouts in the first half alone, and that was who he was responsible
Well, you see,
for. So I think
Boyle was
that
dropping
miss
off. Like, Mayo only had kind of 5 forwards there, so they were always going to be outgunned. It was very easy for Donegal to get their kickouts away short and popped out to the wing. You could see the full forward line are trying to split 2 men inside, trying to split 3 defenders. Patton's very good, he's just clipping them out to the wing, and Donegal are away. But Mayo were saying, we have the wind advantage here, let's sit back, Donegal won't be able to break us down and get scores. And they were kind of, that was proven to be correct in the first half.
Yeah. Well, okay, just what's your take on McFadden sweeping? What's your take on any midfielder sweeping? It's so dumb. Why go back 2 lines to do a job that a centre-back can do? It makes
I don't
no
understand
sense.
it. Well,
it worked against Tyrone that time, and I think they just continued it on, because he doesn't seem to have the instinct of a sweeper. He's going in there, and the idea against Tyrone was Cathal McShane. So there was perfect logic to that. But how is McFadden going to be sweeping in front of Cillian O'Connor and Cohen? They're not fast. Someone else will get back and double up if needed. You're just pulling a midfielder out from who should be in O'Shea's face, making it hard for him. It just seemed bizarre tactic.
Yeah, and at times he actually was in it. Like, if you could pause the match at times when Mayo had the ball maybe out around the 45 and the play was slowed up, McFadden was standing in on the 21 metre line with no Mayo forwards around him. Now, Colm Kavanagh kind of does that as well. That's the way he plays that sweeper role, and maybe McFadden is looking at the way he does it and he's kind of trying to copy it, which is, I suppose, you're trying to prevent any goal being conceded.
Someone breaking the through.
So someone breaks through the line, and then you have the second line of defence. Boyle plays it a little bit further out. Not at times he's a bit late to the party as well, but he is engaging players a little bit further out the field. It's hard to know. Like, if the opposition make bad decisions and come in on top of you, it can look like a brilliant plan. But to me, allowing good players possession of the ball unopposed further out the field is a recipe for disaster a little bit. Like, an example I give is in the Meath Kerry match, for about the first 10 or 15 minutes of the game, Shane McEntee for Meath was trying to drop back in to cover the centre half back position to allow Pádraig Carnan, the centre back, to kind of cover in front of the full back line. But sure, it just meant that David Moran was picking up the ball totally unopposed and dictating and playing in the killer balls, because he's not going to kick it to the sweeper anyway. Yeah,
so unless a forward pushes down on him. But
there's a lot of things have to happen. I agree with you. I think having to drop the 2 lines is a bit much. Like, I think the concept of everybody sort of dropping a line and communicating that and passing somebody on is good to provide you to have cover in your defence. That's a very valid thing, and that's the right way to defend. But I don't believe in having a guy stationed in there idle, not engaging in the play. It's too, they're not involved in the play enough. I think that if somebody gets to the point, I always like to see a bit of pressure on the ball.
Yeah, really, you're down a man from the midfield area. Like, there's no doubt about that. So then, okay, you're not down a man unless Colm Boyle enters the fray. But what happens when Colm Boyle enters the fray and pulls a man towards him? Then there's a man over. Now, the problem with Donegal is they were going so man for man that Mayo just had to beat one and they were kind of through, because Donegal haven't got this game plan down. Tyrone don't have it down because they're too used to zonal players. Mayo have it down to the point where they will abandon their man and come and double up. How many times do we see 2 or 3 Mayo lads? Dublin can do that. Mayo and Dublin are the best at pairing off one-on-one, but not being married to following that man forever. They still can snuff out danger. They know if Aidan O'Shea gets one big strong hand in, I'm getting over there. O'Shea will slow him down enough. I'm getting it. And because the way they're all paired off, there might be 26 players in the half. So the space is massively cut down.
Yeah, exactly.
So you
can afford to leave your man and you can still get back.
Absolutely,
Someone
and they're
will
doing
get you,
it. But here's I mean, how many training sessions, and I think some managers are gone overboard on it, let's play a hand passing game and let's get the intensity. In those hand passing games, it's not always a fist from the fella marking that gets that fist away. It's a loopy pass over someone's head and someone else coming across and opening that. You know what I mean? That is the game now. That if you're committing to pushing everybody up into an attack and knowing that everyone's going to be paired off, it's basically a similar hand passing game where you can absolutely just abandon your man. And like if you throw a loopy ball with Mayo over someone's head with Mayo, you won't have a cop before someone's coming in and taking you and ball out.
If you watch McFadden though, this is why I don't think it's him just deciding to do it. When he's going back, he's instructing a few other lads to drop with him. Like he'll turn around to O'Boyle and McHugh and tell them to get back as well as soon as Donegal lose the ball. And part of the reason maybe because it's such a big wide pitch and Donegal are just spooked about just having somebody taken out with a hand pass.
He's the only one going back now because I'm watching him. Like I mean, and there was at one point they want one sweeper back there all times. It's always him. He turns around and runs backwards with the ball. But there was one short ball Aidan O'Shea got to the wing and McFadden had to follow him because they were pressed up in the kick out. And McFadden started tackling him and Kieran Thompson turned around with his back from the goal and sprinted back into that spot too. So the instruction is obviously we want McFadden back there, but if he can't get back there, then somebody has to fill up that gap. So they're whatever way to do it, they're always going to be a man down out around that midfield. So they're offering the team up. You don't see Dublin doing that. Let's be honest. And you don't see Mayo doing that. And they're the teams that are good at this, this game plan. And I think Tyrone and Donegal need to learn from that and say, hang on, what level are we trying to get to? Are we trying to go a bit more attacking? Are we committing more bodies to the forward? Well, then we can't be losing our midfielder out of it.
But what you'll see Dublin and Mayo do is still clog up the 65. Like they'll get back to a point.
They got a load of bodies back there. And they block it all up. But I haven't seen a Dublin defender standing by himself with no opposition players around. Does that make sense?
Sweeping in front
of the goalkeeper. Like I haven't seen that. Now I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Of course it can randomly happen through the course of a game, because sometimes that's what happens. People get back and they get into a position and all of a sudden they're in the cover and they ball watch for a second. They forget what they're doing. But it's a pattern that Tyrone, that's how Sean Kavanagh sweeps. Hugh McFadden to me looks like he's almost trying to copy what Sean Kavanagh has done. Whereas to me the role of the sweeper was always to try and anticipate where a pass was going and double up, not to play effectively as a reserve fullback or a second goalkeeper, because that's what the role that McFadden seemed to be doing to my mind.
It does. Like imagine Fenton doing that. Like I mean, what are David Moore? It's madness. It's your midfielder. This is supposed to be arguably your most important players on the field. Yeah, and you're using one of them just to get out of there and go back in behind the fullback.
Whatever about your players should be getting back into defensive positions and blocking up zones and making it difficult for the opposition to break you down and cut their way through you. But to me, like a guy like McFadden or some of these big, strong midfielders, I would be stationing them, I mean, maybe just inside the 45-metre line or on it, and engaging the opposition there, rather than allowing teams to bring it into the shooting zone. And then trying to engage them. But to me, that's too late.
It's a waste of a big lump of a fella. It just is. It's your midfielder.
Aidan O'Shea, Neil Gallagher was amazing for Donegal on the 45. David Moore, you said, this is where they do their best work. It's actually safer for you to have them out there where they're interfering with the play rather than standing back watching.
As the two O'Sheas did what they wanted out there, it just doesn't make sense to me. That's where the game was definitely won for Mayo in and around that area. And then you have second half Murphy full forward gone out of it. You have McFadden gone the other side as a full back and Jason McGee gone off the field. Jesus, like, think about what like, I mean, it makes no sense. But they got a good start to the second half, Donegal. They obviously got the penalty. O'Donnell, who was good, in fairness, probably the only one who stood up and scored 2 good points from play. He went in on the inside forward line. Michael Murphy went to the full forward line. Lee Keegan followed Murphy in until he fouled Murphy for the penalty. And then Murphy kicked that brilliant score, put 1 in it. They changed Keegan off him, and Stephen Cohen went on Murphy and did well on Murphy. So that was smart. Cohen cleaned out Langan the whole game. Cohen has turned around on me. I suppose it was a baptism of fire having to mark Stephen O'Brien down in Killarney, and that was it. But they got all their matchups brilliantly. Harrison roasted Brennan, who's gone off the boil completely. For a man, he's playing with no confidence. For a man who shot the lights out in Ulster, it's bizarre. Barrett did a great job in McBrearty. Went up, scored a point. McBrearty did the David Clifford. I'm not following him. He went across to Boyle maybe, which was fair enough. But then the problem, not unlike Kerry, is that nobody ended up marking Barrett. Nobody, he pawned him off to no one. Cohen cleaned out Langan, like I said. Keegan did very well on Murphy. And Paddy Durkin, we're going to hold off on Paddy Durkin on McHugh until performance of the weekend. Perfect matchups. But that's the great beauty of Mayo. They have matchups for anyone. Like, they just have that. And they'll always have that at the back and midfield.
Yeah, they have a great mix there. And even if one of their lads, I mean, like, even if one of their players is getting a bit of a tough time, they just stick at it. And even if a guy is kicking a couple of scores off on their defenders, by God, it's more often than not, it's going to be very hard for them. Look, the meltdown against Kerry aside, you get nothing easy off those Mayo defenders. The guy that's nailed down, who's picked to man up on you, is going to give you your fill of it for the full 70. You might win a couple of balls early, but come the latter stage of the game, they're going to be still going hard at it. So, look, they just deserve huge credit again. I mean, they're just a group of warriors. Like, and when
warriors.
It gets to a real battle like that, you do tend to think that they're going to come out on the right side of it. Like.
I think so. And next week is going to be a wet day in Croke Park. Like, I mean, the forecast is for rain for the next week.
Are Dublin playing with 13 men? Or?
Well, I'd say Mayo would really want a wet, slippy day and turn that into a total battle. That Mayo, when they get into a battle, James Horn said after the game, I thought the application and work rate were superb right through. The turnovers we won in the first half and the tackles the guys put in. And that's it. Just the tackles they put in, the hands they got on, the doubling up, the getting the bodies in, the physicality. Donegal couldn't live with that. And maybe, Donegal need to learn a big lesson, because they came up short against Tyrone last year too, in a game that turned out to be that kind of physical. Not every game's going to be a Kerry shootout in Croke Park. You know what I mean? And Kerry have to learn that as well, that when it came to a physical battle in Croke Park against Mayo, Kerry are found wanting. Do you know what I mean? That's Mayo's strength. It's getting that into a bloody fight.
When it's knockout, Mayo seem to bring the best out of themselves as well when it's all on the line. And that's 2 years in a row where Donegal had a knockout to get through to the semi-final and obviously didn't take their chance.
Yeah, well, look, there are people and there are players who just raise their level. They're a totally different animal if they're playing in a league game or if they're playing in a non-event type of game. They don't look to much, but by God, when it comes to championship, they just go to a different place. And
knockout, yeah.
Yeah, and these Mayo boys have shown over the last decade that they have the capacity to go to that, and they're capable of probably playing above themselves, really, to be competing with Dublin the way that they do. But they're the only ones that have shown the capacity to do it.
Yeah,
they really are. And nobody else is really putting Dublin to that place where Dublin have to go to the well to beat them.
Yeah.
Mayo have consistently done that, and that's why setting up the game for next weekend is just brilliant, because on the basis of all the evidence we've seen, when they haven't played each other, Dublin are going to hammer Mayo. But on the basis of the games that they've played against each other in championship at this stage, Mayo are going to perform just way better than they have done at any point this season. And I suppose that's what we're all banking on again, that Mayo are going to have the ability to do that.
Yeah, we definitely, we have to give Hennelly a mention, because he's only in because Clark got injured, and he went long with 21 of his 24 kickouts. He went short and got in awful sorts of trouble, and it was a terrible ball from McHugh to Brennan, but he went long. But why wouldn't he go long? Midfield, McGee was gone off. I keep repeating this. McGee was gone off. Murphy's in the full forward line. You've got the two O'Sheas as targets, and it's like,
McFadden's fullback.
Yeah, well, no, in fairness to McFadden, he's out in midfield for the kickouts. But the minute that's not won, he's just running back in, So you've lost that. I'm talking about that physicality in general play. But like, I mean, it made sense to go along. Mayo had all the big strong.
Of course, and even if Mayo lose it, Mayo are at their best anyway when they're counter-attacking at speed and they have runners from their half back line. Mayo are not as good when the play gets slowed up and they have possession and they have to dictate the tempo. Mayo are at their best when their backs to the wall, 8 or 10 men inside their own 8 or 12 men inside their own half, and then they have to really break at pace, and it's one ball played up to Andy Moore and probably in the corner, who lays it off to a runner and another runner coming. Like, that's when they're at their most dangerous. So I think at times Mayo are such good defenders, they'll soak it up and they'll try and pick the right times for hitting on the counter. So by kicking long, even if they lose it, they're well set up defensively, and they're not going to be, when they go short is actually where I worry about them, because they concede cheaper scores than they ordinarily do.
Yeah, so to just get it, the only thing is the O'Shea's won't have that same midfield dominance against the likes of Fenton. Like, I mean, they struggle. So now that strength against Donegal will now become a weak. You know what I mean? Will become a weakness unless they can pull Fenton to one side and try and leave someone fight with Michael Darmacaulay and work on breaks, because Dublin are brilliant at the breaks.
Yeah, but I'd be much more worried for Mayo if they were clipping it short to someone in the corner back position.
Oh, me too, with Dublin's press. Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm looking forward to that show. I think Ruan has to mark Fenton. I think he looked lively enough and he's the legs for him. And then maybe put Aidan O'Shea on Michael Dara. At least he's an option to outfetch Michael Dara. Then the Seamus O'Shea doesn't start. So it's not easy to pick that Mayo midfield at this stage, and taking Aidan O'Shea out of there would be, a big risk at this stage. But Henley, 21 of 24 long, maybe we'll see that again, because Dublin's press is just as aggressive as Donegal's press was, as aggressive as they can. I think this idea of pressing up in the kickouts, I've said this before, kick-out analysis bores me to tears, because every county is trying to press after a set play. It's not always possible from general play. McFadden has to come all the way up the field from where he has been. It's just been a point kicked from play. A quick fire point, like a good ball into Murphy from O'Donnell over the bar. Now McFadden has to get all the way up while Henley's sprinting out there. It's not worth his while. So I hate this idea. I don't think any team's giving up any kick out, right? They're just not. They're all trying to win kick-outs. It's just not always possible to reset for them. So can we leave kick-out analysis and pressing up on the kick-out alone?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like Jimmy Sloyan, but I wonder, like, Aidan O'Shea surely prefers Henley there as well. Like, we all know, like, the difference between him and Clark, but the flight of the ball is just nicer for a midfielder to go and fetch.
I know, we
it's
know
not
that
coming down.
Well, that's exactly why he got picked for that All-Ireland final that year. Yeah. But this is the thing, this was used as a stick to beat Mayo with and Rochford with. I covered that game. I think I was back with Off the Ball, and I remember saying that's a good move based for his kickouts. It's a brave move, and for me it's a good move, because Clark was a little bit all over the place, and we know Clark isn't good at them. It's only because Henley ended up giving away the penalty and having a bit of a stinker. Everyone's like, I didn't see anyone brave enough to say that was a stupid decision before the game.
No, well, it was. Look,
it made sense. It made sense before the game.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to really get into it again. It's the same stuff over and over again about Clark and Henley. Like, of course, Henley is your first choice keeper if you're basing it on your restarts. If you're basing it on shot stopping, it has to be Clark. But does Clark, how many one-on-ones is he going to have to save in a game? Henley didn't have any one-on-ones to save the other day, so therefore his kickouts are far more important than his shot stopping ability.
Yeah, well, there's mistakes in Henley that there's not in Clark. That's the problem.
I agree with that.
So that's
in order, what did Rochford say? In order to gain something, sometimes you have to give something.
Give something else up. Just quickly, one last point. What was Paddy McGrath doing for the Killian O'Connor goal? Like, he's marking, the ball's on the half forward line and he's marking from 5 yards in front. And I've said this on the show before. Mark from the front when the ball's in the other side of the field. Absolutely, because then you look up and all you see is a body in front of your man, and then you have to take a solo hop. Someone out the field might get a hand in. Marking from the front, it's never a question of do you always do that or do you never do it. You do both. So you mark from the front when there's a big gap, but when the ball's on that bloody half forward line, like, even if Doherty wasn't going for a point there, he could easily have kicked it in over his head. It's suicidal to mark from the front like that when the ball has gone that far up the field.
Yeah, and I actually thought of you, it was Paddy McGrath the first time, 3 different players. So the ball came into Andy Moore and he rolled 3 different players. You know that one where you were saying Keane was coming out?
I was going to hold that for performance of the weekend.
Well, Andy Moore just rolled 3 of them, and it was McFadden, Ferry, it was McGrath, and it was Ward. Like, every time, and he just let the ball come into him, and the other 3 just got taken.
Because Sean O'Shea did it for his goal as well. Yeah.
Sorry for ruining fun.
Yeah, I hate when people do that to me. That was a good talking point for performance of the weekend. Right, listen, we'll leave it there and we'll be back with Paddy Power performance of the weekend. Okay. Okay, so Paddy Power performance of the weekend. The first nomination is Paddy Durcan. Simply outstanding. The obvious one to follow, McHugh. The gas thing about this is watching this at the match is Paddy Durcan marked Mark McHugh, or Ryan McHugh, but Ryan McHugh didn't mark Paddy Durcan. So Ryan McHugh used Paddy Durcan being on the ball as an opportunity to maybe get away from him when, the ball would work out. But in general, Durcan was kicking it dead, running straight back out, and now he's glued to McHugh for when Donegal have it. So Ryan played the wrong game in this matchup. He should have marked, and this was the analysis with Gavin White. Maybe the only thing with Ryan McHugh is to hammer the hammer and go, right, well, you might, and Kerry did the right thing when he got the black card, you might be dangerous, but what's the best thing for Ryan McHugh is if he's just marked for the whole game and he makes runs whenever he wants to make runs and he does all that. What happens when now he has to mark someone who's equally good going forward like Durcan? It was the perfect one, but we know managers don't always pick the perfect, the one that's predicted by everyone.
Yeah, exactly. It's someone that has the running power and the pace to cause him problems going the other way. And it's interesting. Even you mentioned Gavin White there. He picked up Donald Keoghan as well in the Meath Kerry match, and it's the quietest game Keoghan had for Meath all year because he's occupied having to fight a fire with someone else as well. So Ryan McHugh really plays. He always wears the number 5. It's like his squad number.
Yeah, he's wing forward a lot, mostly.
Yeah, a lot of the time he plays there, and he doesn't really do a huge amount of defensive work because Donegal need him making things happen on the attacking side of the pitch. Like I mean, it's Murphy and it's McHugh, and if they're not having a big influence and not getting their hands on a lot of ball, I mean Donegal don't have a lot of real ingenuity outside of that, or guys that consistently make things happen. But yeah, Durcan was brilliant. Like I mean, he's so good. His close control for the little dummies, and he's such a good shooter as well. And he's just been consistently excellent. I mean, it's surprising to me that he's such a tight marker because he's such a good footballer, if that makes sense. Because his strength is always when he's on the ball and driving forward. But I mean, he's shown a fair capacity in nullifying an opponent as well.
He did very well on Shane Walsh.
Hugely impressive.
Shane
Absolutely,
Walsh. I'd say he's a banker to mark Jack McCaffrey now next weekend, but again we'll talk about that on Thursday's show. But he was brilliant, and McHugh was out of sorts as well for whatever reason, and maybe it was just because Durcan had him on the back foot. And again, he marked McHugh and McHugh didn't mark him, so like it was just a perfect situation. Sean O'Shea ran amok pretty much. He playing inside, Cian, was he?
Yeah, well he mixed. He started off in the first half. He was centre half forward, and he was really, really good. He ran the game for the first 5 or 10 minutes, and he in the second half he seemed to be playing in the full forward line. There was Stephen O'Brien got a black card, and obviously Clifford not playing, so maybe they needed a bit of a presence in there. And he did operate from the full forward line with Tommy Walsh, more often than not in the second half, and he was dangerous in there. He got the goal from obviously playing in the inside line and poor defending from Meath, but he finished it when he did get the opportunity. There was no doubt about it. It was fairly emphatic finish now to stitch it into the top of the net.
Yeah, no, it definitely was, and he used his body there. Who was it? Gallagher tried to get out, or Gavin
McCoy.
Oh, McCoy, the wing back.
The wing back, yeah.
Right.
So again, a clever play, maybe pairing up against the wing back and dragging him into the full forward line and making your runs from there. So just clever play, spotting that bit of a mismatch, and McCoy maybe not in his natural habitat, lunging for a ball that he was never going to win, and then look, he compounded it by slipping then. So it was just a disaster all round from him in that scenario, but brilliant from Sean O'Shea.
But it is, Conán, we'll talk about your Andy Moran and Sean O'Shea stuff, and it's the ability, and I've done this is something that's not that hard to do, but instead of you're breaking out for the ball, instead of catching it, you just turn your body and you let the ball come the other side of you. And like if you're marking an over-eager defender, it's perfect, which is McFadden Farry is way over eager. I think McFadden Farry is a very good man marker out around the field, but he's a bit of a sitting duck inside in a full back line. So I think where Donegal need to play him is number 7, like where he plays for Guido, where he torments a lad following him everywhere around the field. But I wouldn't mind marking McFadden Farry in a full forward line. It's that kind of kamikaze-ness of trying to win over eager to try and win every ball. Andy Moran's too smart for that. Like, he's just turning his body. It's almost like a bullfighter with a bull. It's like, say, come on, and then just pull it out of the way.
Like, he did really well on Martin Riley, McFadden Ferry, because he was out around the pitch. And I suppose you can take more chances as a marker out around there, but if you take a chance and it goes wrong in the full back line, and it's over. Like, Andy Moran catches it and shoots or passes it off.
Yeah. But in general, when you're sticky, we've explained this before, when you're sticky out around the field, Martin Riley wasn't getting those handy hand passes and stuff because he's being marked, and McFadden Ferry has the discipline to do that job, where a lot of other players might get sucked away wanting to go on to play. He's disciplined enough to follow a lad all over the field out there. But inside is a different ball game, because if a lad makes a break inside, he will get the ball. You know what I mean? So, like, it's a different dynamic.
Yeah, it's a totally different type of movement as well from being in the inside line and out the field, because it's a sharper movement, it's an explosive movement, and then the ball arrives, and then you only need half a yard and you can pull the trigger. If you're further out the field, oftentimes guys are relying on the handy little hand pass the whole time. They're not having to do a lot to get on the ball. And when that's the way you're used to playing, all of a sudden you have this lad stuck to you, and you have to make massive changes of direction, like an inside forward. But you've nowhere to go because you can only get a hand pass off the lad beside you. So it can be very difficult for guys to get on the ball when that's the type of marking they're exposed to. But just on that, the whole thing of guys diving in, and Moran did it really well. I mean, when you're marking a player like that, I mean, you get a little bit ahead of them, but you know they're coming. Sure, you slow down before you get the ball so that you're ready to go on the half turn. And sometimes you take the risk that maybe they'll get the hand in. But I mean, if they get the hand in once and you get the next ball and it's in the net, I mean, that's sometimes what you take. You take the chances an inside forward of trying to take it on the half turn rather than securing possession going away from goal.
Yeah.
So it's a calculation that defenders sometimes have to make, is that, I can't win this ball, or I'm not taking the chance to lunge in here. I could get turned, and they can just step off, and they don't let the forward turn then, as opposed to lunging in and ball in the back of the net.
And in fairness to Moran, he mixes it up well. I have him down here as well. Like, he'll often win that ball and go the long way around. So now the defender's not sure what he's going to do, and Moran can turn left and right. He can let the ball beat him. Defenders are guessing a lot on him,
and he's very sharp on the turn. His first few yards are
still
quite
very
explosive,
good,
and he has a step.
That last point he got, there was no point on there. So
the left footed one.
Brilliant
Because
point.
Again, but that kept him guessing, because you often see Moran win the ball, turn and sort of back off, like he's scanning the pitch, and then he just ran at the two of them, and went. McFadden Ferry was one of them again, and just went in between.
Yeah,
because they weren't expecting him to come at him.
Yeah, and they made a great impact, and Kevin McLaughlin played very well, scored a good point as well. We'll forgive Andy Moran for the fisted point. I think that's an exception to the rule. That's
no,
pushing it.
Take him off.
Killian O'Connor wasn't happy.
He wasn't.
But I think that was risky. There was a man coming back to cover, and that was to put 3 in it. So that was enough of a blanket to allow a fisted point at that time of the game. Agreed?
Yeah.
Just about,
Cian doesn't look happy, but
I think by the time he's playing the ball, the goalkeeper is out close enough to him. I think if Moran could have taken the shot a little bit earlier, possibly, or stepped inside, but Moran was already after stepping in on his left.
He had missed
and having a poor effort where he just kicked it against the keeper. That was Patton's second really good one-on-one save. In the context of the game, puts them 3 up. Yeah, of course it's the sensible decision, but it doesn't mean I have to like it. It's not very entertaining.
No, that's fair enough. Aidan O'Shea has to get a nomination here, lads. Just another outstanding game. And you always think, and we said it on the show before, the Aidan O'Shea knockers go very, very quiet while he's playing brilliantly and he's dominating games and he's doing all the hard work. And we know Aidan O'Shea's best attributes are his work rate, his tackling, and his physicality. And when he's out at midfield, all his qualities come to the fore. He can dominate games. He can win primary possession, and that's what he's good at. When he's in at full forward, his tackling is gone out the window. His turnovers aren't as effective, and his ball winning, he could be double marked. So, you're judging a fella in a position he just can't use any of his attributes in. Centre forward, he can use them a bit more, but midfield is his best position. All the Aidan O'Shea knockers go quiet for the last 3 or 4 or 5 games. What will happen if he doesn't play well against Dublin, which could easily happen around midfield? Well, if you mark Michael Dara, it'll be a brilliant matchup for physicality and tackling, because Michael Dara is a very good tackler as well. But if he plays badly that day, of course he's a bottler and he doesn't do, it's just, you always see them go into the woodwork when he's playing well.
Yeah, he takes a lot of flack, doesn't he?
He does. Unnecessarily for a warrior player. Like, he should be really loved by everyone, if we're being honest. Like, what's there not to like
big,
about
honest player,
a big honest lad? Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is. I mean, is it because he sometimes wears white boots and Brian Fenton wears black boots? I don't know. Sure, how can you predict it? I mean, like, if anything, you would be looking at it and you'd be saying Fenton has more natural talent and better, more skillful than Aidan O'Shea, and you'd be looking at it and saying he's playing on a better team. And O'Shea is this warrior who inspires his teammates and, you know, really brings the fight to a lot of these teams and continues to do it, and he's just such a robust and enjoyable player. For me, I'd have great admiration for him, and I don't understand why people would be knocking him, to be honest. I don't know why he's a target for it.
I don't get it, but he's a lightning rod for it, and it's completely unfair. I think it's Joe Brolly who's kind of started this, and again, there's a clip doing the rounds of Des Cahill and after the Kerry game, and, are they finished, Joe? They're finished. That's Mayo gone, you know, and you're kind of laughing at that. But that's that kind of analysis. Forget about Aidan O'Shea. No, he's a glory hunter, whatever. And that's, like, you'd be surprised how many people are influenced by that, because it doesn't make sense to me how anyone would be critical of a player that does what he does on the field.
Yeah, my biggest criticism of Aidan O'Shea genuinely is that he works too hard. Like, I think he's involved too much in the hard work, and it's sort of, I'd like to see him more like getting the ball, having a bit more energy to go forward. He does that a lot anyway, but I would like him to save himself almost. But it's so weird. Even if you think of 2017, when he went in that run through the qualifiers, he was by far the best player, because he was midfield, he was winning ball, he was doing all that hard work. So this is 2 years in a row, like, not in a row, but Mayo have gotten their act together those 2 years, and he has been the most influential player.
Yeah.
Through pure honesty.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, that's a great way to put it, Conán. Through pure honesty of effort. And if there's anything to be admired in a footballer, you know, at that level of the game, it's that ability to do that consistently year after year. And then when you think of all the shite the grief that he gets, I mean, just...
Yeah, and he doesn't shoot anymore. He's only 1 point this year because it's not his...
It's not his game.
It's not his game, and he's not unbelievably accurate. And that's another stick that's used to beat him with. Oh, look, he bottled it. He didn't bottle it. He's just not accurate.
Yeah, well, I think what probably hurts him is the like of some of the comparisons maybe between, say, himself and Michael Murphy. He gets compared to Michael Murphy a lot. Michael Murphy is a full forward who goes out to play midfield. Yeah. Aidan O'Shea is a midfielder who was fired into full forward.
That's exactly it.
So Murphy is a far more potent and a better forward, and a much greater ability to get scores and play as that forward. That's not like, if the two of them played on a midfield together and you had Aidan O'Shea sitting and you had Murphy with the ability to bomb on, there'd be some combined midfield. But they're totally different players, and it's a totally unfair comparison.
Yeah, but sure, again, we know who's making those type of comparisons. It's the people with agendas that don't like Aidan O'Shea, because you're right, it makes no sense. Final nomination is Sean Bugler, although Brian McMahon was very good for Meath, was he yesterday?
He got through an awful lot of work. Yeah, no, he was good. Yeah.
Sean Bugler was outstanding for Dublin, and, like, I mean, he got 3 points. He threw the ball across for Owen O'Gara's goal, which had Dublin beaten the spread, which got my tip for Paddy Power this week. I don't get too many right, so I was like, go on, Bugler, great ball across there. Now, Owen O'Gara, there you go, handicap covered again.
And it was a brilliant pass, because
it was perfectly weighted. Yeah,
it was ideal. And Bernard Brogan was losing the rag altogether with lads not giving him the little tap in like that. He had 2 chances where he could have got the ball like that, but
poor Bernard was very overeager yesterday. I looked at him running around, desperate to get on ball, and going, I've been there.
Yeah.
And you don't get ball when you're that desperate for it. You actually don't. Like, I mean, the truth is, if you just stand still the odd time, a ball will come to you. But it's hard when you're...
But there's so many of those Dublin forwards that are all trying to become the player that gets on the pitch, and to a certain extent, they did have to play a little bit for themselves, which meant that if there was a chance for them to take a score, they were going to try and take it. They were maybe all taking at times a little bit too much out of it, because they wanted to see, could I do something? Can I make something happen here myself, rather than move the ball on? And for Bernard Brogan is the poacher, so he doesn't want to get involved in the play at all. So what he wants is all these lads to be totally selfless, so that he can get all the scores. You know, where he's making the runs, or he's getting on the end of the move. He's not going out for first phase ball and laying it off. He's holding his run, and he wants O'Gara to make the run, and O'Gara then lay it to someone. Then Bernard is waiting there for the last little tap into the net. Yeah, like he's made a career out of it, and there's a role for somebody like that. He's a brilliant poacher.
There is, but yesterday he was coming looping on the other side of the field. Like he was looping around everyone nearly at one stage. But let's talk about Bugler, lads, because he's a big lump of a lad. He's not that easy on the eye. He looks a little bit clumbersome, or I don't know, agricultural. Would that be fair to say? Like he doesn't look great. He's no Brian Fenton, right? He's no Brian Fenton, but his 2 points were from impossible angles.
Fenton's a Rolls Royce. He's an old Volkswagen there chugging along, isn't he? Yeah.
Well, he is. He's not. He's no Fenton, McCaffrey, style. I wouldn't say Kieran Kilkenny, because he's a weird style as well, even though he's brilliant. Con O'Callaghan has a nice, graceful style.
Brian
Howard, and actually Scully has a lovely kind of relaxed style to watch when you're watching it. But Bugler doesn't have any of this. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what he's going to be like. Maybe a working wing forward looks to be his best position. Alan Brogan was talking him up. He's Plunkett's.
Yeah, he's Plunkett's, and Alan Brogan had a tweet talking about how highly he rated him. So, I mean, look, that's a fair endorsement from anybody. If you get the endorsement from Alan Brogan, you can't be doing too much wrong. But look, he did exactly what you'd want him to do as a player on the second string. Like, he really showed up really well yesterday, and did an awful lot of good things, and was making stuff happen. And did he get 4 from play?
3 from play.
Well, he was debating one that went over, and set up the goal. So, I mean, he showed an ability to kick points off both feet. He's athletic, quick, strong guy. I mean, it's all there for him, So, and it's
big too, big lump of fella. And his post-match interview was pure Dublin. It reminded me, of Niall Scully's interview when he scored the 2 goals against Donegal. So he started off, it's a privilege to put on a jersey and represent Dublin. Straight out of Jim Gavin playbook there, privilege. He's privileged just to be working with these players. So privilege is a big word. In there. Then he says it's an honour to represent them. So he doubled down on it. Then he says, I'm delighted to do so, and I'm delighted with my own performance today. Alarm bells. It's like Niall Scully last year kind of got a little bit overexcited and admitted to liking his own performance.
I don't know if Bugler will feature the next day.
No, straight away he corrected this. Then he says, but more importantly, the team performance. It was all about the team and about getting over the line today, and we did that. So you're okay, Sean. You pulled it back.
You can just see the wheels turning. I'm delighted for me. Oh shit! I mean the team.
No, actually, the team performance. The team. Now listen, this is a bit of tongue in cheek on Sean Bugler. It's great to see him. He's only a young player, so fair balls to him to even be talking in front of the cameras at the same time. We're only having a bit of crack. Okay, he's too young to be. We're not slagging him here. This is he's only a young player, but this is what even the old players are saying on the team. So he's learning fast.
Look, we're spotting a great trend here of Dublin players being privileged to wear the jersey, and it's lovely to hear that. And fair play to him. And he played well. Yeah. And he's on performance of the week because he played well.
We're privileged,
not for the interview.
We're privileged to be talking about them
to
here.
Be even watching them in the pursuit for 5 in a row.
I just can't believe I'm in the studio with you two.
Is it a privilege to be here?
Well, I'm privileged to be presenting with you two guys here.
But it's not all about you, it's about the team.
It's about the team. That's it. That's exactly it. Performance of the weekend here before we lose the run of ourselves. It's like
Jim
we've been
Gavin
drinking
for his interview.
It's like we've been drinking here. We're getting carried away. Paddy Durcan is performance of the weekend. I think that's nobody really
that was the only
that
was the game where there was something.
It was. It had to be from that.
It has to be from that. In fairness,
it has to be from that. So yeah, congratulations, Paddy Durcan. And I don't know about you lads, but I can't wait for Thursday's show. 2 brilliant semi-finals. We're going to talk about them then. That's always time for today. So we'll talk to you on Thursday. Good luck.